But in this week's measurement, Ironheart had 5 hours, a little over 5 hours of runtime available. So it was there. Ironheart came in at number 5. And a lot of people's reaction to this is, oh, it was number 5 on the charts. The number 5 show, the number 5 most watched show in America. No, that is not how the Luminate charts work. You have to do the math. Let's pivot over into a little bit of Ironheart because I got to do a little victory dance here where I said I told you so. So this was last week. Remember we had this. We did not get on Friday. We did not get. Okay, you did see it, Tom. Okay, perfect. We did not get an update on Friday from Luminate like we normally do. And that was because obviously here in the U.S., it was the 4th. It was Independence Day. So Luminate did not release their data for the week. However, it has changed. And what I want everybody to look at, in fact, let me shift back over to the side because I'm blocking too much of the actual chart here. Ironheart did not appear on this chart in the first week that it released. It releases on a Tuesday. These charts run from Friday at midnight through the following Thursday. So Ironheart would have had its Tuesday night release plus a full Wednesday, plus an entire Thursday, release plus 2 full days. Did not make the chart. Mobland, like we reminded people before, Mobland with 260 million minutes is a show that had finished its entire season 3 to 4 weeks before this measurement. So it's still hanging in the chart. That's how popular that thing was. But what this told us is that Ironheart, with 2.5 hours of premiere, couldn't even rack up more than 260.8 million minutes to barely squeeze into the top 10 and beat Mobland. So we knew at that point that based on that and based on that measurement, that the viewership for the release date plus 2 days for Ironheart had to be, it had to be probably somewhere around or less than 1.5 million views in the U.S., that's a CW show. It's garbage. Okay? Well, guess what, kids? Monday evening, we had an update. We had an update from Variety, and I told you that Ironheart will almost certainly appear in the next week's chart because just like Andor, the amount of available watch time that was so rapidly dropped, it would be almost impossible for it not to show up. Well, it did. It did, just like we told you. But there's more to the story. Let's look here. Here is the week ending July 4th. Squid Game just absolutely dominated. Now, that dropped with 6 hours. But in this week's measurement, Ironheart had 5 hours, a little over 5 hours of runtime available. So it was there. Ironheart came in at number 5. And a lot of people's reaction to this is, oh, it was number 5 on the charts. The number 5 show, the number 5 most watched show in America. No, that is not how the Luminate charts work. You have to do the math. You have to do the math. And we do the math here. Always do the math. Ironheart, and I said the good thing, the reason I want it to show up on the next week's chart is because it's going to show us how poorly it did on its debut. And on its debut, it did even worse than what we thought. Right there at number 5, previous estimated minutes watched, 222 million 0.7 minutes. 222.7. That was way behind Mobland's 10th place at 260. So that means that last week, Ironheart probably didn't even make the top 20. That's how bad it was. So we are going to say, watch, this is how this works, everybody. Ironheart had 150 minutes, roughly, right at 150, 155, but right at about 150 minutes of available runtime the week that it debuted. So what we have to do is we have to take 222.7 million minutes. Okay? Right there. 222,700,000 minutes divided by 150 minutes of available runtime. 1.484 million. 1.484 million people watched Ironheart in the first 3 days that it released in North America. This is a show, like many other Disney shows for Marvel, that Disney probably spent $200 million on, at least between production and marketing, if not production alone, because we know this thing sat on the shelf for 3 years almost after being filmed, finishing principal photography. It was shot around the same time as Wakanda Forever, and then had to be worked, reworked, and worked again nearly a dozen times from what we heard. Did not work. But yet the bots on Twitter out there, the bots on social media will tell you that this was a huge success, right? Yeah, just a big pile of dog shit. Bunch of lies. Let's go to the next week, though. It picked up. Well, Valiant, look at that. It more than doubled into the following week. 567.9 million minutes watched for Ironheart. Now, some of that, of course, was spillover from the previous week before the second and final 3 set of episodes dropped, right? 6 episodes total, 3 the first week, 3 the second week. So this now at 567.9 million captures that second week drop. The problem here, kids, is if you average this out, you're still talking about less than 2 million viewers, or right at, if you're lucky, 2 million viewers. Doesn't work out, does it? When you look at episodic drops on here, okay, true episodic drops, things that come out on things like Amazon Prime, you start crunching the numbers. You look at Mobland, like we talked about in the previous week, right? When Mobland was peaking, when you did the math on every week, you had a 40-minute episode dropping, and the watch time kept growing and growing and growing, and you ran the averages. We were coming up with figures that probably somewhere on average, Mobland was being watched. The new episode every week was being watched by somewhere between 12 and 15 million on average, compared to 1.5 to 2 million for Ironheart, a show that probably cost twice as much, if not 3 or 4 times as much as Mobland. This is the problem. That's always been the problem with Disney, is the amount of money they spend compared to the audience they generate. I see people at Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Yeah, I think that was, America's Sweethearts. There's a lot of dudes watching that show. And as I continue to look at the movies, K-pop Demon Hunters is like an hour and a half long. When you bake in 90 minutes to that instead of 150 on that 305, Poop Cruise, again, 245 million minutes 2 weeks ago for Poop Cruise on Netflix, which I did watch. It's a 55-minute documentary. It's actually fascinating because it goes back and it covers the cruise ship, the Carnival cruise ship that was stranded in the Gulf of Mexico for a week 10, 12 years ago now. Look at Poop Cruise again, 360 million minutes in the following full week. It's a 55-minute. It is 1/3 the runtime of what was available in a single week's drop of Ironheart. It is 1/6 the runtime, less than 1/6 the runtime of Ironheart, with all the episodes having dropped this week. There's 11 million people. Cumulatively, 11 million people have watched Poop Cruise on Netflix. 11 million just in the U.S. According to Luminate's data, 11 million people have watched a story about a cruise ship that was flooded in and shit, and 2 million people maybe have watched Ironheart. Which show do you think cost more money? Which show do you think cost 20 times more money? Like we said before, Ironheart has been defeated by action. That's just how it works. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.